But I'll tell you something else about where I live. This is I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it's fascinating, I think. If you went down my garden and you climbed over the fence, you ended up in the garden of Ozzy Osbourne. I remember his family when we were kids. I'm just trying to remember the road that he lived on. I forgot the name of the road. But it backed onto Fenton Road where we lived. The house that he lived in now is owned by an Asian guy that will charge you to come in and go into his bedroom or something like that. But yeah, that was a community. I remember all the white kids. It was just like when I was younger growing up, it was like the birth of heavy metal. We could just hear it in the air. I remember Ozzy Osbourne's family because they were like motorbike parts in the garden and on the kitchen table and stuff, and it was like really rough, and little bits of amplifiers and stuff like that. But we were all into ska and early reggae and stuff, so we just thought they were kind of slightly odd.
So a match made in heaven, really. Did your mum sort of think of herself as Caribbean or a British citizen of the Commonwealth? What did it know as?
Well, put it like this, when I took my mum to Jamaica in '86, when I brought her back, she called me one day. I went to see her. She took me to a graveyard and she said, "This is where I want to be buried. None of this sending me back to Jamaica. She said, I'm British. None of this," because people were tempted to do that. I want to be buried back in the homeland and all that stuff. My mother said, "No, buried me here with the co-op, right here." She definitely, she wasn't really that interested in politics and culture in the sense that we talk about culture, but she would definitely identify herself as, a member of the Commonwealth.
Okay. Continuing, we talk about identity here. As someone who in 2008 was on the Times list of the 50th greatest English writers of a post-war era, what cultural influences did you pick up as the son of a Jamaican mother and, for a while, a Bajan father?
Well, we only start to analyse this kind of recently, and when people ask us questions about it, right? Yeah. But put it like this, I remember being in church not so long ago, maybe 10 years ago, it's not so long in the scheme of things, and my mother was preaching, and I could hear my rhythms in there, the way she was doing it, and she came up and I said, "Mum, you really sound like me," and she literally slapped me across the head a bit. "No, you sound like me," and she's right, of course, And then I started to analyse it more, and I realised that what I was doing was listening to the preachers in church. There is another stereotype, which is kind of true. This mainly relates to black girls, kind of true, but also boys, but mainly black girls. When they start singing in church, right? They've got a good voice. The church loves female voices, right? Choir is good, it gets you noticed and everything else. So if you've got a voice, you join the choir. A lot of people look at the choir. Certainly they listen to the choir. That was okay for me, but I was interested in the preacher. The way the preacher would use repetition. The way the preacher could perform in a way that could convince you of stuff that's kind of impossible. I don't want to dive deep into religion, but some of the stuff in the Bible is completely made up, we know. Some of the stuff in the Bible is stolen from the Epic of Gilgamesh and lots of other writings that went before it. Some of it is just people tripping out and writing stuff, right? But there's a burning tree that's talking, and the preacher can convince you of that because of the performance. And that really interested me. The way the preacher could use rhythm and verse and speech with pauses, kind of what's the word? I was going to say choreographed in a way that just tells a story about something that you can't see, but he makes you think that you can see it and you can feel it and you can everything else. It's a very powerful thing. So I'm convinced now that a lot of my poetry, a lot of the style of my poetry comes from there. At the time, I didn't realise it. And this is a good thing, because I think, if somebody comes to me and they say they're influenced by me, and I say, show me a poem or perform a poem for me, and it sounds like me, I don't like it. If they say they're influenced by me and they perform a poem that sounds nothing like me, I go, oh, that's good, because you found your own voice. So I kind of listened to what was going on in the church and everything, but I found my own voice. And I tell you what helped me as well, reggae. So I'm listening to the church and I'm listening to reggae music. And a lot of reggae music talk about what's going on in Jamaica. But I want to talk about what's going on in England. So all this stuff comes together and it makes Benjamin Zephaniah style poetry.
So who are your mates? When you're 8 or 9 or 10, who are your mates in Birmingham when you're rolling the streets? Who do you hang with?
Well, I'm not very good at the ages. I know when I was about 5 or 6, and I was experiencing real racism at school, at a particular school. My mother moved us out of Aston and took us to a place called Hockley for some reason. I think I always tell this story that my mum moved us out, but I think it may be that she got a house there, but she was very proud of the fact that she was sending us to an all-white school. I mean, it was hell, but it was all white. On the day we arrived there, to celebrate the arrival, the teacher told the children to bring in their favourite gollywogs. Could you imagine? That's how they celebrated our arrival. It was it's like a dictatorship. It was a very Protestant school. And I remember coming home one day after having a bad day, and this kid would come running up to me. He says, I'll be your friend. I said, what do you want to be my friend for? He said, before you came, they used to pick on me. And I went, oh, why would they pick on you? You're white. And I went, yeah, I'm white, but I'm Irish. Well, so what? Are you Christian? He went, yeah, but I'm Catholic. And I said, okay, you can be my friend. And me and him became friends for a while. There are a couple of people in my life that I wish I could meet again. I'd really love to meet him again. Because I didn't understand what he was saying at the time. And not so long ago, I met somebody that went to that school that said that school had a real reputation as a real Protestant, hard-line school. When you were singing hymns in the morning, they would walk and make sure that every person was singing. And if you weren't singing, they would stop and make you sing the hymn on your own to show that you know the words. So I remember kind of hanging out with Robert once, and he almost got me killed. We went to there was the guy selling fruit on the corner, and he went, grab an apple and run. So I grabbed an apple and ran into the street, and a car came and it just touched me. And then later on, when we moved from there back into Aston, on the same road where Ozzy Osbourne lived, but in a slightly different place now. Then I just remember having mainly a lot of Jamaican black kids around me that I used to play with. Nobody's kind of special really jumped out. At school, I was what they call the cock of the school. Into like the best fighter in the school. So I do remember that somebody would do something to my sister and they'd all come to me and go, can you get him? And I'd go, and I hardly need to fight really. But they would just give up. But there was a kid, I remember a rumour went round. There was a guy called Leslie Fellato. And he was like, he can beat you. And I was like, no. and he was bigger than me and everything. And I said, no, he can't beat me. And I kept going on, I'll fight him any day. And then some rumours went around, some gossip that, you know, I'm scared of him and I can't take him on. And one day I just went to him, you know, a gang of kids behind me. And I said, fellas, oh, come on, fight. And he wouldn't fight me. And I remember kind of going right into his face and going, come on, you want to fight? Let's see who's the cock of the school. I said, come on, fight me. I said to him, fight me. In my head I went, please don't fight me. Because I knew he could beat me. And to his credit, I think at one point I pushed him and come on. And he wouldn't fight me. And everybody just went, yeah, I'm the cock of the school. I remember coming away from that going, thank God he didn't fight me, because I think he could have taken me down. I tell you what happened to me. I mean, this is not about race. This is when my father started getting violent and hitting my mum, and I went to a kid in school, a friend, and I said, because I didn't know what to do. So I said, what do you do when your dad hits your mum? And he said, my dad doesn't hit my mum. So I went, oh. I said, I know. You got like one of those feminist mums. Your mum hits your dad. What do you do when your mum hits your dad? And he goes, my mum doesn't hit my dad. Your parents are not supposed to hit each other. And he said, there's something wrong in your house if that's going on. And I just came away thinking, I thought it was normal. Maybe, you know, maybe there really is something wrong here. But yeah, sorry, I just hit the microphone.
No, I mean it's classic. It really is.
When you're a kid, you're learning all the time, and so there are times when people say. I remember when somebody told me I was dyslexic. I wasn't a kid, but I was like, what? What's that? Then when they described it to me, I went, yeah, that's it. That's it. I got a name to it now. Growing up.
Yeah, I know. Growing up, identity, etc. I mean, there's always a question. I always ask this question about. The question is, what question do you never get asked that you wish you had?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have a question like. I remember when I was young. I remember being told off in school and being called naughty and all that stuff. Being told off for being in school and being tired or late. And I always wish somebody said, or asked me, what's life like at home? You know? Because if you leaving home to go to school and the last thing you saw was your mother being beaten, you don't want to sit down and do maths and like the way the other kids do it. You don't pay attention in class like the way the other kids are doing it. You know? But everybody was saying, you know, you're not paying attention, you're a bad boy, this and the other. And I used to think, why doesn't nobody ask me what life is like at home? Is it not allowed? Am I supposed to just forget home and just go to school? So that's a question I would have liked people to ask me when I was younger. Nowadays, I mean, maybe if I wasn't a performer, I would have questions I'd like people to ask me, but I can't really think of any. I always, you know, when I do interviews, I always say to people, there are no no-go areas. A lot of members of my family don't like me to say that. But I like to speak the truth about whatever it is and even talk about the mistakes I've made. And sometimes that gets me in trouble. But I still say to people, you can ask any question on any subject you like. I would love to, strange enough, the people, I was going to say I'd love to get questions that really stump me, that I just don't know the answer to. And the people that ask me those questions are children. I've just been touring, about 6 months ago I was touring in Senegal. I was taking these questions from the kids. And they were mainly about poetry, when did you start writing poetry, this and the other. There's one kid that stood up and he went, what do you think the future will be like? Could you imagine a 7-year-old or something like that ask me that in a big audience, a big arena with 1,000 kids or whatever? What do you think the future will be like? It is a question that I've thought about. I know what I would like the future to be like. That's why I campaign on different things. But to have a kid ask me, I've got to answer in a way that's age appropriate. It's difficult. I can see all the teachers look at me and go, wow. You can literally hear them in the room. And not long before that, a kid was in school and they were talking about doing their work and getting marks, and the kid turned around to me and went, "So, you're a writer?" And I said, "Yeah." And he went, "Who marks your work?" It's a really good question. Who marks my work? I had to think about it, and I said, well, it's not exactly marking, but I have an editor, and then I put it in the public domain, and they tell me how they feel.
Yeah.
So I love those questions that come from kids,
Yeah.
Because they're not particularly journalistic. They're just things that they wonder, what will the future be like? If we get our work marked, who marks his work? Who teaches the teacher?
No, I think it's great. I mean, kids do have that. I mean, it's part of their sort of journey, really, about imagining futures.
Yeah.
A child that doesn't have that is a troubled child. So that's great. It is a great question. Thank you. Good. I'm glad I asked that question. Finally, I just want to talk briefly about sort of Windrush's 75th anniversary. So I'd like to, as I've said here, I'd like to briefly touch upon it being the 75th anniversary of the arrival of the Empire Windrush into Tilbury Docks. I mean, it wasn't the first. Obviously the Almanzora arrived a year earlier, and it wasn't the last. But it docked at such a time that it became that cultural marker in the sand, so to speak. Embarking from that ship, the 1,000+ brothers and sisters had dreams and aspirations. Many of those dashed within weeks of arriving, and those that came after them have also struggled. Yet, between then and now, Britain's cultural and economic landscape has changed significantly due to the arrival of the millions who dared to travel to the UK. From your mother arriving back in the day, what do you see her contribution being to the country, and what do you see those that came after her being?
Right. Just before I did this interview, I was listening to a program about Danish people that came to Britain. I think multiculturalism is one of the things that Britain does best than most other countries. I'm just going to do this bit of praise first. We have a tendency, and I think it's wrong, to think of multiculturalism in terms of kind of Windrush generation and Asian and black people. The Angles are one culture, the Celts are another. The Burma tribe who settled in Birmingham were another tribe. The Celts were one tribe, the Juts, the Scillas, all these people brought their different cultures. Huguenots, all these people brought their different cultures. The people that don't like multiculturalism kind of use that in a way to cover up their racism, because you never hear them complaining about the Angles and the Saxons, and all the white tribes that came. But to think about the Windrush generation, we have to acknowledge that there were black people here before the Windrush generation. Some of them came in Georgian times. A lot of ex-servicemen came on the Almanzora just a year before Windrush. I can't remember his name, but I was talking to a fella not so long ago. He passed away just after I spoke to him, but he came on the year before Windrush. And then he's related to Alan Wilmot, actually, the comedian. But I forgot his name. Do you know who I'm talking about? His second name is Wilmot.
Gary?
No, Gary Wilmot.
No.
What's his name? I interviewed him just before he died for a program I was making. Anyway, he came on the Alamazura, and when the Windrush docked, he actually came and watched the people getting off the ship there. And he talked about the real reality. I think sometimes people talk about it a little bit through rose-tinted glasses.
Sorry.
What's it?
Gary Wilmot.
Gary Wilmot.
I know.
That's funny.
I'm sorry, what's his name? Gary Wilmot is a comedian.
Yeah.
So it is Alan Wilmot then.
I don't know. Is
I
he
think-
related? Are you related?
I'm gonna have to
Go on,
Google
Google
it.
it. Google it. Google it.
I'm gonna have to Google it.
I think I was right then. I think it is Alan Wilmot, and he's related to Gary Wilmot.
I've just been joining.
I did a program a while ago about the Windrush generation and football, and he was in it, and he gave me his little autobiography. Then he invited me to come to his house, which apparently is like a museum. And then not long after he died, I found it.
Signal's not very great in
No,
the
it's
basement
not.
here. We'll find it.
We'll find it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
he talked about kind of sleeping in bus shelters and underground stations. He said that so many of the men that he knew that came from the Windrush or that generation were completely off their heads, madness, you know. We would call them now nervous breakdowns, you know. They couldn't tell people at home that they were doing well, and they had nowhere to go in England. Lord Kitchener comes off the Windrush and sings "London is the place for me," but he was hounded by the police. It wasn't long after he went back. I'm sorry, I don't know the year, but he didn't stay. He had real problems with the police hounding him. We have to be very realistic when we look at that generation and the things that they've gone through. Mona Baptiste, who's somebody I wrote about, she was very middle class, almost. She travelled first class on the Empire Windrush. There was a photograph of her with a trumpet in front of these musicians that were on the ship. She didn't play trumpet. Somebody just gave her a trumpet and said, you know, so she poses with it as if she's playing it. You know, she dreamt of a life being a musician in England. It kind of started, it didn't go brilliantly, so she went to Germany where she became even more famous. Yeah, and then France and some other places. I think that, I'll put it like this. When my mother arrived in England, she said she was surprised that all the white people in England didn't know Shakespeare and weren't reciting him. She was surprised that they didn't have pictures of the Queen in their house, you know, because she did back in Jamaica. She felt that her education was more English than the English education. So she had this kind of respect for all these British institutions that sometimes she came to England and found that the British or the English didn't have. I remember being on my mother's lap when she's talking with aunties and uncles, and the conversation was about the British and how they went around the world and built this empire. They went to Africa, control so many countries in Africa. They went to Asia, control so many countries in Asia, Australia, the Americas, etc. but yet they don't want to look after their own old people. Yet they don't want to drive buses. They did all these great things, and they don't want to wash their elderly, so they have to bring foreigners. They bring us here. When I look around this area here, anybody know the area that we're talking now? Well, no, the issue here, the biggest Brexit vote in the country. Sorry, I was starting to talk about Brexit. I can't say it. Biggest Brexit vote in the country, but most reliant on Eastern European labour in the country. So I can take you to fields now where crops are just rotting in the fields because there's nobody to pick them up. You know, and a lot of the Eastern European young people are saying, great British people, but they don't want to pick potatoes. I mean, it's food. They want to eat it. They complain about the prices, but they don't want to pick it. You know, and so I remember a version of that story when I was growing up. In a way, I think that my parents and my parents' generation had too rosy a view of England, of Britain. You know, when people talk about fighting for the country and all that stuff, I think their expectations and what they thought of Churchill was too overblown, was too respectful. You know, Winston Churchill never really respected us. You know, I don't want to get too political, but when Winston Churchill watched those Bengalis die, take away their food, I mean, he was, some would argue, and I would, that he was guilty of at least allowing all those Bengalis to die of a famine that was avoidable because he preferred to feed troops. I don't want to be part of the empire. I don't want to be part of a family of anybody that wants to control other people. The reason why I don't like the Commonwealth is it's in the words. The wealth is not common. It is just a face-saving mechanism after the fall of empire. So that's my position. I understand the generations before me, because for them, you know, let's be really honest, a lot of them weren't thinking about empire. A lot of them just thinking about work, just bettering themselves. A lot of British soldiers that went to war weren't thinking about empire. You know, a lot of British soldiers cannot understand. I was going to say Islamic soldiers, but I better be careful, but people that are fighting for a cause that they really believe in. They can't understand somebody that can put the bomb on themselves and go, I believe in this cause so much that I'm willing to blow myself up. I mean, would somebody for the British Army do that? I doubt it. They're thinking about the wage, most of them. You know, they don't really, really believe in the cause. They're doing it because the politicians have told them that this is necessary and this is the way we do it. And, you know, that's why when you see the interviews, I'm doing my job. You know, you will, very rarely will you hear somebody that's really fighting for their country say, I'm doing my job. You know, they'll say, I'm fighting for my people, my cause, whatever we think of it. I'm not trying to do propaganda now and get people to believe in it one way or the other. I'm just showing you the difference. So I know lots of people now who will do interviews and talk about, you know, joining the army and joining the RAF and everything. And when you get them alone, it's a job, man. It's a way out of the ghetto in Jamaica. You know? I have a friend, he was amazing. He was in the RAF, he was shot down over Holland. He was shot down over Holland. A Dutch family took him in. And the Nazis came and they made a false wall in their house and they kept him there. And they would bring him out every now and again and feed him and everything and put him back. Because he was black, they're saying, we can't get him to blend in. And literally troops were walking down the streets and these little houses where you can look straight into the living room. So they couldn't risk having him in the living room. And the family came to him and said, look, the war's not going to end. you know, can we keep you forever? You may as well give yourself up. And he went, right, I'm going to give myself up. And he gave himself up to the Nazis. And one of the things he spoke to me with pride about was the fact that one day when he was in prison, Hitler came to his cell for a photo opportunity to be photographed with a black man. Right? And he said Hitler kind of stood next to him, took the photographs and everything, and used them for propaganda, and then just left. Yeah? And he was telling me this in Jamaica. And when I heard his story, I was like, wow, I've got to tell this story. I mean, there's much other stuff as well. He lived in like a house that was like covered with ivy. You couldn't see the door. You had to know exactly where to put your hand to open the door. And it's like you walked into a tree. And he used to sell ganja. You know, he was an elderly man when I met him, with grey dreadlocks and everything. And he had this amazing story. And I said to the people that introduced me to him, I need to know his story, to write it down. If he's not going to write it down. People had been trying to get him to write his life story, and he wouldn't do it. So I said, well, I will come back to Jamaica, and I'll sit down and I'll record him and I'll write it down and I'll do it for him. I came back to Jamaica, and then I got bad news. Some 16-year-old kids went into his house and shot him. That was it. The story's gone. The story's gone. Yeah. He's really honest about joining the RAF. He says, well, I could fly. I wanted to fly a plane, you know what I mean? I didn't really understand the war and all that business. You know? So I just wanted to get out of the ghetto, you know, fly a plane? Wow. You know? So I do think sometimes people need to be more honest and just say, look, you know, this was a way out. A lot of people, my mother, she wasn't thinking about the big empire and all that stuff. But she did love the NHS. But she was like a little girl that wanted to be a nurse. And at the time, the best system they knew was the NHS, right? So she, you know, that's what she wanted to do. She will look back now and say, that was my contribution. Yes, but at the time, it was a job. I think the Windrush generation I hesitate a little bit because, again, it's not just the Windrush generation, but the Windrush generation and people that came before really did help build this country. And they'll talk about how great it was and all that stuff, but if you think about the food, if you think about the music, you know, you couldn't have had the specials, two-tone ska music, you know, without the Windrush generation. The Beatles in Liverpool said they were listening to black music. They were watching people come off the ships and looking at what records they got and stuff like that. You know, there's lots of stories about this kind of cultural, what I call cultural intercourse. We know their contributions to car industry and factories that they worked in. When in Birmingham, there was lots of car factories. Lots of black people worked at Lucas's. They used to do the lights, or British Leyland, Land Rover, just outside Birmingham in Coventry, Triumph. Then you could even talk about football with some great footballers, a few great footballers. But then there's the second generation and third generation that are playing now that, you know, contributed to not just football actually, but sports generally. So it's unquestionable. You cannot deny the contribution that the Windrush generation has made to Britain. My problem is that most people who you talk to at street level, if you like, can appreciate it. If you come across your out-and-out racists, they, of course, they're not going to. But I don't really believe that the powers that be appreciate it. They are locking them up. They're locking them up for paperwork they said they didn't need. So they arrived at the docks as children, some of them. I wrote a novel called Windrush Child, and this is what happens with Windrush Child. He looks at his mother, says, "Mum, where's my passport?" Mum looks at him and says, "It's okay, you don't need it. You're on my passport." He says, "Mum, I want my passport." He said, "Don't worry, the Queen guarantees you. It's okay." And then the novel follows this boy growing up in Manchester, and it ends with him in prison because he hadn't got a British passport. He wanted one. He was told that he's secure here. They're not getting the compensation they deserve. I think the government's holding out because it knows that, well, it sees many of them dying off. And I don't want to join a party where there's no justice, where there's no equality. I'm happy to celebrate the achievements of our people, but I'm not going to join the establishment celebration. The establishment cannot give justice to the very same people it's supposed to be celebrated. So that's my issue personally. I can remember many years ago doing with Grace Jones and Linton Kwesi Johnson and some other comedians doing a gig in celebration of the Windrush generation, and people didn't know what we were talking about. When I talk to my mum and say, "Mum, did you realise you're the Windrush generation?" She goes, No. It's a new term for her. This is a term we've come up with recently, and there's a government definition of it. It's from, I think, 1948 to 1972, something like that. I may be wrong. There's actually an official government definition. The light's gone out.
I like it.
Hey. Yeah.
They're listening.
Yeah, so I just want to sort of, I mean, on the 22nd of June, there will be this thing, there will be this focus, this spotlight on it being the 75th anniversary. And I hear what you're saying about black people being, coming before 48. As you know, I've said, my great-great-grandfather, George Jarvis, came in 1873 and stayed, So my grandmother and my father, all born in Britain. My grandmother was born in St Albans in 1902. So we know that, but it just seems like a significant, marker really. So you acknowledge, you're basically saying, look, I get it, however, for you to sign up to, you have reservations, I guess. Yeah. I
mean, I don't even celebrate my own birthday. I'm just grateful for every day that I'm alive. And I'm grateful for every day in this country for the stuff we do because of people's contributions. That includes the Windrush generation. For God's sake, that includes the Irish that came here to work and all these other people that came to work. If I could, I'd celebrate them all every day, but in my own mind, I do celebrate them every day. I think having a 75-year celebration or day to mark it is kind. To me, they're very important for the people that don't understand. Raising awareness. I think that's where it really comes in, and schools can do things and stuff like that. But me personally, a song from Peter Tosh comes to mind. Everybody's crying out for peace, none is crying out for justice. I don't want no peace, I want equal rights and justice. Well, in this situation, I would say, I'd rather the justice than the celebration. Once we get the justice, we can really celebrate. But I can understand why you have days to make people aware of things. And I've written about the Windrush generation, of course, to make people aware. It is kind of strange that many projects that I've been involved in have struggled to get funding, and they are all connected to Windrush generation. If I take you home now and show you my inbox, oh, we are planning to do this on the 75th anniversary, it's like Black History Month, suddenly everybody, wants to kind of celebrate for their credibility.
Absolutely, I've been writing funding applications for 30, 40 years, whether it was down in Cardiff or with Bob Bowl, which we know really well.
I saw a great tweet a couple of years ago, and it's not about Windrush, but it was about Black History Month. It was a woman complaining. She said, I've been trying to get Benjamin Zephaniah for Black History Month, and I can't get no reply from him. And to be honest, I don't know where she was going. I never heard of it, but anyway, but somebody replied back and said, did you try him in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August? And I thought, well, enough said,
Yeah. And Patrick Vernon. As you said, the whole idea of focusing on one day. That was his thing. For profile raising, he campaigned for a long time to get that day, sort of in the diary. That's why Patrick, that was his passion, etc. And for that, I totally respect him for that.
It's almost like Martin Luther King.
I know. Yeah.
You can understand why it's there, and it's good, but for
yeah. I always, when I started doing a bit of research for this and everything, I forgot about we're going off piece now, and I forgot about when Malcolm X came to Birmingham. That was on the 12th of February 1965. 9 days later, he was dead.
Yeah. Well, did you see the film I made about him?
Oh, not all of it. No, just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, no, the BBC found some
I saw that footage.
Yeah, some footage, and it's just a small piece that I put together, and because he went into he didn't drink, and he went into the pub to try to get served, and he couldn't get served. And I think it's Marshall Street, the name of the street, that was campaigning to keep the street white. And I walked down there, and now it's like really multicultural. But he came and he did a talk in Oxford. I think it was. And it's a very touching thing. He does a talk, a really powerful talk, and he comes away, and Tariq Ali says to him, "That's brilliant. You should come back. We really want you to come back." And I'm paraphrasing now, but he says something like, I don't think I'm going to make it back. I don't think I'm going to live to come back. And Tariq Ali said, why? He said, I have to now go to America or the United States and tell them that I've changed my mind, that my views have changed. When he left America, he was like, the black struggle is about black people, white people can't have no involvement. There were some things about them being devils and all that stuff. When he came out and he met good white people and he went to Mecca and all that kind of stuff, he changed his mind. He had to go back to his people and tell them that he changed. And like you said, I think it was 8-9 days or whatever, he was dead. It's a brave thing to do. Politicians find it very difficult to do now. They have one point of view, and then they've learned something that's changed their mind. How can they tell their public that they've changed their mind? Very few do it. And he had to, he did it at a time when he knew that could cost him his life, and it did.
Price. Yeah. No, I just think it's a beautiful moment, really. So Malcolm walking down that street, I think the Indian Workers Association invited him, didn't they?
Yeah, because he was, he came to do this talk, like I said, invited by Tariq Ali. Tariq Ali says that when he met him, Malcolm X said, it's great to see a Muslim brother. And Tariq Ali went, hold on, I'm not a Muslim. I've got a Muslim name, I come from a Muslim family, I'm not a Muslim. I'm your brother, I'm not a Muslim. And within a couple of days of him being here, somebody said, why don't you come to Smethwick and see some racism in England? And that's I think he was somebody from the Indian Workers Association, and then he went up to Smedley.